It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Jaya Helin, and as it may have been mentioned, I come here from Nevada County in California, where I stay at Ananda Village, which has been an intentional community, started 1969. It's been a long time, and I've been there that whole time. There was no Ananda Village when I showed up there, but through the efforts of many, many souls, hundreds of souls, maybe thousands of souls by now, it's been able to be developed in a very, very beautiful place. It's a community. Now, we're based upon the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, and I suspect many of you probably have read Yogananda's autobiography of Yogi. Is anybody? I've never run into an audience yet, and there was no hands were raised up. And it's an interesting thing. We read that autobiography, and we feel the presence of a very great master there, a God-realized soul. But it's somewhat unknown to many people, and most people I would suspect, and certainly those who don't have a close familiarity with Yogananda's life, that he had, especially in the latter years of his life, he had a very, very abiding, deep desire, you could say, to see, as much as a master can have a desire, to see the creation of what he called world brotherhood colonies. And he with power, he would say, youths must go north, south, east, west to spread this message that plain living and high thinking lead to the greatest happiness. And that was the motivating, you could say, the impetus for the creation of the place from which I come, Ananda Village. This was created by a disciple of his, Swami Kriyananda. He put the energy out. Many of us helped, and we were able to create that. Well, this interest that he had in starting World Brotherhood colonies is what, in a sense, brings me here this weekend, because some of our dear friends, people who have lived at Ananda Village, have gone out, and you might say, taken that message to heart, have gone out to create such places. And one of those is Polestar. And I see a number of you here, and Michael and Ann, who were the impetus getting this started. And this weekend, they're having a groundbreaking ceremony. Tomorrow has been announced, and all of you being invited as well. And so I too was invited, and so I came to participate in that, to lend my energy to it, since I have known Michael and Ann for many, many years. And so we've come out to participate in that. But I think it's, when we say communities, and Paramahansa Yogananda, he made some prophecies for this. He says, in the future, living together in small communities will be the social model, that people should go out, and this will become what seemingly is now rare. We'll go out, and there will be many people who will do this, because it's a social model that will help people attain what they're really looking for in life. What is that? It's the spiritual path. We give ourselves an environment. There's a saying that Yogananda would say, environment is stronger than willpower. Put yourself in an environment that supports your ideals, that supports what you want to do in life. And if you arrange your environment, that's half the battle right there. And you find yourself not having to swim upstream. So create an environment. And why just limit it to job, or why limit it to school, your association with other people? Why not actually get together residentially and create little villages like that? Well, I know today when we speak about communities, often this is what comes to mind. And we had a nice program yesterday, people speaking from various traditions about communities. And I could see that when people speak about communities, the tendency is to think in residential terms. Living together, creating houses, creating a village, and that's natural, that's a nice part of it. But we have right here, right now, we have a community. What is a community really? It's a group of people coming together to affirm values, affirm beliefs, are firm ways of living, and that's exactly what unity is. That's exactly what all churches are, is people coming together, and by affirming these things together in a group, we strengthen them in ourselves, but we also strengthen them in society as well, which is extremely necessary in this day and age, to make the values real. And we give inspiration to ourselves, we give inspiration to other people to actually take the steps to make this a reality out in society as a whole. Well, yesterday I wanted to follow up on a little something I said yesterday, just sort of off the top of my head. I had 5 minutes. So obviously I wasn't going to go very deep in the subject. But after I started speaking, I says, I want to say a few more words about that. And maybe it will tie in also of what we're speaking about today here, is this community enlightening together, moving forward, realizing God, being with God together. And in my couple of minutes that I had, I said to the group, I'm going to say a word that's going to make a little of some of you nervous. God. You see, because yesterday there was a symposium of speakers from many different angles, planning, land use, co-housing and things. And I wasn't quite sure if that was going to be something that would be well received. But I knew that I could probably say God here. And it would be okay. So I just said it as that, and I just left it at that. And I was making a point, which I did not go into, but it's my belief, and this was expressed also by my teacher, Swami Kriyananda. He said a truly successful community cannot, or a successful community cannot be created without the inclusion of God. Now, that's radical. And if I would have said that, of course I would have got myself, people wouldn't have understood what I was speaking about. But it's because people don't quite maybe understand what God is. God is, what do we have here? Joy, love. God is back there. And without the expressions of God, how can you have a successful community? Because what is the purpose of a community? It's to uplift and raise the consciousness of individuals and those people who live there. And that's what we're doing here. You come here, we all come to our church, our faith traditions, to be uplifted, to have our consciousness uplifted. Uplifted toward what? Ultimately uplifted toward God consciousness of God in our lives, to be able to express that in our lives. Now, it's an interesting thing. I'm a minister for the Ananda Church, self-realization, but interestingly, I've spent from 2005 until 2020 living in India. We have spread our teachings, we share our teachings widely, and it's been my task to do that in India. And I have to say, speaking in India is so pleasurable for one reason. You can say God and talk about God, and people say, of course! Everybody, the taxi driver speaks about God, everybody speaks about God. And in India, they take an interesting approach. It's a secular, by constitution, a secular country. But rather than, as America is in a secular country, that's good, I'm fine, that's good. We don't want to have divisiveness. But India takes an interesting approach. Rather than not talking about God, every religion has its day. They include all religions in their tradition. So you've got Christmas, you've got the Buddhist day, you've got Guru Nanak, you've got the saints of all religions. They all have their day, and people celebrate publicly, all of them, everyone. And that ultimately leads to respect. And it's not out of bounds to speak about God. But when I say, can you have a successful community without God? You can have a residential housing complex, certainly you can. But does that make a real community? A community is more than that. It's a union of hearts, of people, of working together, of striving in a direction with each other, as we see happening in every church congregation, working together towards something higher, raising that consciousness. Now, a little story that Swami Kriyananda, who was my mentor, and he once told a story that he was giving a discourse about some spiritual topic, and it was in a wide group, and he was talking that God is important, we need God in our lives, how it's going to benefit us, and so on. And at the end, one fellow raises his hand, and he says, yes, and he says, well, and this was in Australia, so at this point in telling the story, Swami Kriyananda would put on this very heavy Australian accent. Well, this fellow said to me, he says, what? I'm an atheist. What do you say to me? And Kriyananda thought about it for a moment. He says, why don't you think of God as your own highest potential? The fellow thought, well, that'll do, that'll do, and he accepted it. But I thought it was actually a very good answer for him. Our very highest potential, something that we can't perhaps even express what that is. But in that statement, it's an implication that we are moving towards something, and maybe away from something else. Away from that littleness, the pettiness, the ego, all of those things that limit us and to keep us bound and to keep us in smallness. We're actually moving towards something, our highest potential. So if we're going to have a community, a church community, a residential community, it has to help people in some fashion achieve their highest potential. And ultimately, that highest potential in the traditions of religion, traditions of all faiths, perhaps expressed in different ways, one to the next, is that realization, which Paramahansa Yogananda termed self-realization, but not with the little s. It's that self, the higher self, which is another way of saying our highest potential. It's another way of saying God. It's another way of expressing that ultimate potential to which all of us are seeking. We seek it, unfortunately, in byways that somehow we mistake, and we have to learn our lessons. But deep down, there's that, no matter how much we satisfy those desires we have, which are somewhat of the world, we're not satisfied. It's the only thing that ultimately satisfies is the divine. The divine gives that rest, that comfort, that satisfaction to which all of us are looking. And that's what a community, now putting it in the sense of the context of why I came here to join, Michael and Ann and many of you here, to have that vision, that goal underlying why we're doing this. Why is a community being built? Why does unity, is it here? It could be, and there's nothing wrong with recreation. There's nothing wrong with gardening, or there's nothing wrong with any of these things. They're all good. But the deeper question is, why do we do what we do? And bringing that spirit into whatever we do. And it's embodied from the very beginning. Kids going to school, let's spiritualize that. Let's bring God into that. Adults going after their job, let's bring God into that. And in that, we make community, spiritual community in that. Shopkeepers, public servants, serving and using that, whatever it is, as an opportunity to express divine principles. And I think this is what's needed in the world today, is for people to feel comfortable and to share God that is in you is that same God within me. And that's the binding. The diversity that we're looking for. you could say, is it's not the diversity, it's the outward diversity. What is the unifying factor behind diversity? And it's those things that bind us in common. Paramahansa Yogananda said, from a practical point of view, how do we get there? And he said, we must learn the art of cooperation. Learn the art of cooperation. This is, the world needs this, the art of cooperation. And he says, and in a divine sense, he said something that I've always taken to heart. Very few people can do it all on their own. We are a team, all of us. We work together. And he said, if you cannot win the love of your fellows, other people, your brothers and sisters, if you cannot win their love, other people's love to yourself, how do you ever expect to win the love of God? You have to be able to express that love. You know, people say, I love God, I can't stand my neighbor, though. Yeah, but I love God. We have to, in other words, our challenge is to bring the divine way of life into our daily lives. And that's why we create communities. It gives us that opportunity, and it gives us the support that we might eventually all be enlightened together. God bless all of you. Thank you for having me today.